Hello and welcome into another Rolling with My Special Friends podcast. Today we got a great guy coming to us from the Midwestern Baptist College. He's trying to study to become a preacher, but he's got such an amazing story that led him to where he is today that I just knew we had to get him on the show and be able to explain to you guys all the things that he's come through and where he is now and just the things he's overcome. He's such an inspiration to know him and be around him. So I'm going to bring him in now and let everybody meet him. Luke, how are you doing?
Doing good. How you doing?
Oh, doing just fine. Now, we just love on this show just to dive right into what we got going on and to be able to hear, from your side of things, your story and let people know how you're out there touching lives and the things you've come through to get to where you are. So tell everybody listening, I know on YouTube people can see you, but everybody listening to this podcast, tell us exactly medically what you got going on.
About 5 years ago, I lost my sight completely. I had full retinal detachment as a result of a car wreck. And so I'm blind now. So that's what I have going on.
Now, in that wreck, can you tell us about when you say you lost sight? Give us some more details, like exactly what happened there. What did did the retina detach and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So what happened was I was driving home from a church and a moving van crossed the center lane and hit my truck. And that force that impacted snapped the retinas, those nerves behind the eyes, just snapped them in two. And so it caused instant blindness. And because of those type of nerves, we don't have the technology to help them reproduce as of yet. So there wasn't really anything the doctors could do to repair that.
Oh my goodness, man, that was a bad wreck then for it to be that much level to make that much damage. Now, also in a wreck like that, I'm sure other things happen. Were there other broken bones?
Yeah, there was. So pretty much every bone in my face was broken. My jaw was broken about 4 places, and my left arm was broken as well. And was able to undergo several surgeries to have those repaired. Since in the hospital about a week or over the week following the wreck, we able to have a few surgeries to have those repaired. But those were the main injuries. But yeah, the force of that wreck, they did not think I was going to survive that. They didn't even call med flight. They didn't think I could last if they had waited for a med flight to come. So they did what they call a scoop and go and just put me into the ambulance. Didn't even take my ID or anything. Just put me in the ambulance and rushed me to the hospital as quick as they could.
Oh my goodness. Now tell me, you said something about broken bones in the face. Did they have to do anything as far as wiring your jaw shut and all that kind of stuff, feeding tube and those type things?
Yep, they did. When I first got to the hospital, one of the first things they did was intubate me. And then I was in Huntsville Hospital here in North Alabama is where I was taken first. And then after a few days, I was transferred up to Vanderbilt. And while I was there, I underwent an 11-hour facial reconstruction. And as a result of that, they put a lot of metal plates and wires in my face and some mesh. And then they ended up wiring my jaw shut because of that. And so I had the next few months having that and then working off of that as my bones begin to heal.
Right. So now tell people out there listening, I know it's kind of a traumatic thing that you're going through and mentally and stuff like that. How, in that process, if you don't mind telling us, how were you mentally? How do you process something like that?
Yeah, so it was an interesting journey with that. I don't remember the wreck itself. At first, I didn't even remember that day, but talking with some people, I remember leaving church and making it about 5 minutes down the road. The wreck happened about 40 minutes after that, but I don't remember the wreck itself. And for the next 2 weeks, I don't have any memory. I remember leaving church and then being in rehab. So being in the hospital and hearing what had happened, I don't remember that. I just remember I was in rehab and that I couldn't see. I had thick gauze pads over my eyes, but I just took it for granted that it was something else that was healing. And I would go back to doing what I loved. I was a carpenter at the time. And then one day, one of the doctors came in and told my mom and me that the blindness was permanent. And that was a really big turning point in my life when I realized that some of the things I cherished the most were gone and weren't going to come back. And when I realized I couldn't see again. And so that was a really hard journey to come to grips with of I'm not going to be able to see again, and really struggling with that and struggled with that for a few months. Several months actually, until I finally just came to grips with the fact that, okay, I was a believer, had faith in the Lord, and I knew that he had allowed this for a reason. And even if I couldn't understand, I still had to trust him. And it was a journey over a period of months coming to terms with it.
Okay. Well, and I understand that that's rightfully so with that much going on. It's a traumatic life change, and there's not a lot of people out there that can deal with that as well as you did to, just in a few months to be able to pick up and put your faith back on top of everything and move on and take on life's new challenges. Now, you alluded to it a little bit that you enjoyed the woodworking and some church activities, before your injury. Tell everybody out there, what age were you when you got hurt?
So I was 19 when I lost my sight, but I've been doing construction work and carpentry work for several years. When I was 15, the some really bad tornadoes had come through North Alabama, and so I started doing some repair work with some of the local churches after that, and got involved in some carpentry type mission trips here in the States, and started getting that. And then when I was 17, I started interning through a trade school on a framing crew, and just continued on with that.
Talking about the woodworking thing, are you able to still do some of that now?
Yeah, I am. We have a detached garage that we've converted into a wood shop. And so I still get out there and do some woodworking and stuff, making like some small cabinets or some like coasters or things like that.
Well, now that's pretty cool because I know there's people out there listening that would love to know that with an injury like yourself and a limitation that's going on that you can still do the things you love. And I think there's a lot of people out there that sometimes look at their disabilities and think, well, oh, I can't do that anymore. But if there's any more of a prime example, it's you of being able to you enjoyed that woodworking and you just picked it up and kept right back on going. Now you've talked about it several times already with being involved in church and your faith and everything that's going on. Tell us, for everybody out there listening, how big of a piece is that faith in Luke's life?
That was a pretty large piece of my life, especially since, but even then, I was raised in a Christian home, became a Christian at an early age. And at the time of I had started involved in church about 45 minutes away from my house. And I was there pretty much every service that we had, and was being involved in helping out with volunteering, a few things that they needed help. I was going to help out with the vacation Bible school they were going to have that year. And had in previous churches taken part in helping out with running the sound system, and just try to get involved in different ways with churches, and had a morning devotions with the Lord. And so it was a pretty big part of my life at that time.
Okay. Now, you say at that time, I'm assuming that we're still on the same page right now, obviously going into the college thing. And as we talked about you being enrolled in the college and trying to study, to become a preacher. Did in this injury, as you came through it, and as you were talking about your faith, did this lead you into any speaking? Are you telling people now about the injury? Do you do testimonial type stuff?
Yeah, and that's kind of a funny aspect of the story is right before the wreck. The wreck happened in March of 2016, and so that year, that spring, I had just joined the church that I was going to, and the pastor had told me, he said that every Easter Sunday night they have a couple of the young men give a short sermon, and he asked if I would be one of those guys to do it. I was pretty nervous about doing that. I did not like getting up in front of people and speaking, but I prayed about it. I was like, okay, I can do a 10-minute sermon. And the wreck happened, and so I didn't do it that year. They had someone else come and fill in. But then for the next few months, my pastor would joke with me, and he would say, hey, when are you going to give me that sermon you owe me? And I thought it was just a joke we were going back and forth with. And one day I finally asked him, I said, are you serious? And he says, yes, I want you to do a whole Sunday night sermon. And so I did, and was nervous, but felt like, okay, I fulfilled my responsibility. I gave him that sermon I owed him. And then I don't know what happened after that, but a lot of some of the other pastors I was connected with started hearing about that, and started inviting me to come and share either my testimony or give a sermon, and have just since then felt that's the direction the Lord's leading me in. And so that I preach pretty regularly now to church, usually about once a month.
Oh, wow. Well, that's pretty neat to get that comfortable in there and doing that. Now, kind of going off of that angle a little bit, we've talked about you being in college and you're doing the speaking and the preaching that you are. So do you see yourself becoming a full-time pastor?
I do. Yeah, that's what I did not think about that at all before, but over the past few years, I definitely felt that's the direction I'm supposed to go in. And been overcoming some more of my nervousness with speaking. Still get on edge sometimes, but definitely do feel that's the direction I need to go.
Now, what is the focus in college? What is your primary areas you're trying to lock into?
The two areas I'm really focusing upon right now is biblical languages, the Greek and the Hebrew. Learning that, I've taken 2 semesters of 2 classes of Greek so far, been able to get those textbooks in Braille. Excuse me. And then the other focus is going to be on pastoral leadership, um, ministering in a local church setting.
Okay. So now when you say the pastoral leadership, I basically, what you stated there is that kind of you getting ready to take over a church? Like you want to be a full-time pastor, right?
Yes, either a lead pastor or an associate pastor, something like that.
Well, I can't think of, hearing the story so far, I can't think of a better person to get in there and show other people, how in our lives every day things are going to happen, but also how you can look into it and find the good in it and overcome and move forward with your faith. Now, tell us kind of off of that, you have a church family, but also a lot of people out there have their regular family that they're involved in every day. How, for people listening, how did you feel like when this accident went on that your family, got, obviously it's a shock to everybody that it happened, but how was your family?
Yeah, family was really supportive, especially my mom. My mom was really supportive in helping out. She did a lot of research to help me figure out what am I going to do now. Well, when we found out that the prognosis was that the blindness was permanent, she began to do some research about how to learn Braille and a lot of things like that. And it was an adjustment for all of my family to try to come to grips with this new way of life, that things had changed in a lot of ways for our family dynamic because of this, and shifting and trying to come to terms with it. But as time has gone on over those first few months, everyone sort of embraced it, especially some of my siblings. They really just kind of took it and ran with it, and were there and have helped me and supported me, and have been there. If I have trouble doing stuff with the computer, they'll come and help me with that, or trying to learn about how I do things. So they've been really supportive through this whole thing.
All right. So tell people that are out there listening that may not understand, when you refer to Braille, what exactly is that?
So Braille it's a system. It has of reading. It has raised dots, that series of 6 dots that are arranged in sort of like a muffin if you turn it vertically. So 2 columns of like 3 dots each, and there could be 1 dot in cell, or it could be up to 6. And the arrangement of those dots represent a letter or punctuation. And so just by feeling those with my fingers allows me to be able to read.
Oh, wow. Now I've heard the terminology before. I've never actually touched one of those pads to be able to understand that. So does it really, I've always heard it say that if one of your senses were gone in your body, that the other ones are heightened. Do you feel like you have better sensitivity in your fingers, touch and taste and things like that?
Yeah, taste, not so much. I did lose a little bit of that because there was all the wreck, some of that with my some of the nerves, but that's come back. But I would say probably the biggest sense that has increased since then is my sense of hearing. I feel like that's increased the most.
Wow.
But I have to feel more sensitivity with Braille, because some of my family have tried to learn Braille, and some can read and write it, but they struggle with it, I think, more than I do, because they rely on their sight more.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's kind of an advantage. Once a sense does go down, you really focus on the other ones hard. And, like, even like your smell, I'm sure you're so much keener on, knowing where you are by some of the smells.
Some of that has come back. At first, I couldn't smell very much at all. Because of the force of the wreck, it had broken a lot of the nerve, that went to my nerves that went to my nose, and they're thinner than human hair, and so they broke a lot of them. Those have since come back, so I can smell probably about what I used to be able to. But at first, I could only smell some random stuff that had a pretty heavy scent to them. But it's come back over time.
Right. Well, and I'm glad that those other senses have worked their way back with that nerve damage. Sometimes those things work out, and sometimes they, that nerve, it's hard to get those few little inches it needs to kind of reconnect and get things going. So I'm very glad that, as we were talking about, your family's been involved in this thing, and I'm also very glad that the senses that you do have, you're learning to be able to take advantage of that and use that in your everyday life to make life better for you. Now, to kind of go off of that trail a little bit and get over into you a little bit more, I did hear from somebody that you were into writing books. Is that well?
Yeah, that's right. I just published my 5th book. So first four have been novels, three more historical fiction. And I didn't grow up liking to write, but it was in the period of those first few months after the wreck, once I became to terms with my blindness and decided to go back to school, there were some paperwork issues and some holdups with being able to go directly back into school. So I was like, I got to have something to do to fill my time. And I just thought about writing a story. Not say write a book, but just to write a story, just for something to do. And as I did that, I found I loved writing and just began to write. And it turned into my first book and then just continued on since then.
Well, now that's pretty inspiring as well to other people that are out there listening. And these writing the book, I mean, tell us, you've said 5 books. So what are some of these? Are these specifically, have you wrote one yet telling your story?
Yeah, the one I most recently published, it's called Never Saw It Coming. And it does tell my story a little bit before the wreck and then through what happened. And then through that first about year and a half was where probably the most dramatic change happened. And so I do have that published now.
Okay. And then tell us about the other ones. What are they about?
Yeah, so the other ones, they're all novels. The first one is called the Master of My Life, and it's sort of a contemporary novel, sort of inspired by a few things I had gone through with trade school and some other things. It's about a young man who has a past and trying to come to grips with how could a loving God allow evil and suffering in the world. So that was a pretty one I was writing from a lot of experience, and it was a pretty personal novel. It wasn't an autobiography, but just inspired by some things I'd gone through. And the other 3 are called the Choice, The Cry, and The Change. And it's a historical fiction trilogy about the American Civil War. That was one thing I had studied a lot right after the wreck, just listened to a lot of audiobooks, and I've enjoyed studying that for a long time. And it traces the journey of a young man from before the war through the actual conflict into the Reconstruction period afterward.
Right. Wow. Now that's a wild extreme there from one end to the other that, nobody would have ever thought, being into war like that. So what got you started on those things?
I don't know. Growing up, I grew up in Maryland. I lived there from the time I was about 2 till I was 12, and enjoyed history. One of my favorite movies for years was the movie Gettysburg. Had been up to Gettysburg to visit some of the battlefield up there, and just enjoyed studying that through school. And then when I came home from the wreck, I had a lot of extra time on my hands and just got some digital books off of Amazon and just began to listen to them through the Amazon Echo devices. They can read books to you. And like one series I got was like over 128 hours of audio about the Civil War. And just really began enjoying reading that and begin to imagine what would it have been like to have been there. And what got me was a young man about my own, trying to think about what it would have been like a young man, say he was 19, who was opposed to slavery, but lived in Virginia. Like, what kind of pressures would he have felt? What would it have been like? And as I begin to imagine and think about that, was the inspiration for that series.
Wow. That's definitely an era most people have not gone back and put a lot of thought process into, because that really, shaped and molded our country in ways. Now, tell me, on these books, now that we're on the subject of those books, how do people find them? Where do we go? Do you got a website?
Yeah. So my website is called hisministries.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the links there to get the books directly from me, the print books, but there's also the links where they can be ordered on Amazon, either in paperback or Kindle. So hisministries.com is a place to check those out.
Hisministries.com. Just, is that anything capitalized? Like his is a capital H or no?
No, it's just straight, just lowercase letters.
Okay. Now, on the social media part of the world, I do want to be able to cover that. Is there ways out there that if people want to talk to you about the injury, or maybe even get you to come speak at their church, how do they reach out to you?
Yes, my contact information and some of my social media links are on that website, hisministries.com. That's probably the best way people can get a hold of me. I have links there too. So my social media, email, and things there.
Okay. Now, do you do paid gigs for your music playing? Like, can somebody hire you to come play?
I haven't done those. I have volunteered at a local farmer's market and put out like a tip jar. People do that, but I haven't been hired to come play. I just enjoy playing music when I can.
But you would be open to it if somebody reached out to you for that then?
Yeah, I would consider it. Yeah.
Okay, well, that'd be, I think it'd be a great thing and wonderful for people to be able to see you do what you do. There's another friend of ours between me and you, Russell Craig, that's a super guy with his music too. He's really got it dialed in on that stuff. I've sat there and listened to him before, and it's amazing to me, how well he can play. And it's also, I just think it's a matter of time before we see some big music coming out of him on the radio.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely has a passion for it, and he does a lot with it.
Now, do you play, talking about music, do you play anything other than the guitar?
Yeah, I do. So my second instrument is a mandolin. I enjoy playing that a lot, but I also play the cello and viola, and I have played both of those for our church, the churches
Wow.
I've been part of.
Now, was it as hard to kind of get dialed into those things as it is with a guitar, or were some instruments easier than others for people out there listening?
The guitar and mandolin, I had already, and a little bit for the cello, but I had already started playing those before I lost my sight, but not a whole lot with the mandolin, mostly guitar. The cello was hard for a while to learn how to get, because it's a little bit different than a guitar. You have to have a lot more muscle memory with. But I had a really good instructor and took lessons for a little while, and he helped me put some like tactile tape on the fingerboard so I could feel where to put my fingers. And he was really patient with me and worked with me. And so over time, I was able to learn to be able to play enough where I could play in our church that I was going to the time had a small orchestra, and I would on Sunday nights, and I would play in there.
Okay, so now tell everybody out there listening, if you were to recommend one instrument for somebody to pick up and start playing of those things that you said, of the mandolin, of the guitar, of all that, which one would you say would the one to pick it up, to the easiest?
I think guitar is probably what I recommend. It's my main instrument. It's so versatile, but probably an easy one to pick up would be mandolin. Actually, there's a website called mandolessons.com. He has a lot of free lessons on there. It really walks you through where even if you can't see what he's doing, the way he describes it, you could still learn how to play it without having to look at the screen.
Oh, I got you. Okay, well, that sounds pretty fun to do. Now, we speaking of fun, we do love on this show to be able to kind of get a lighter side of you and let people know something maybe out there that's funny about Luke that they've never heard before. Can you share a funny story of yourself with us?
Yeah. So back in 2018, I was going down with some friends to a convention, one of the conventions for the National Federation of the Blind down in Orlando, and with some friends, and we had got there to the hotel, and then we were going to go out to the grocery store to get some food for the week. And so I went there and with some friends, and they said, okay, you got your stuff now. The cash register is like straight ahead of you. And I was pulling the cart behind me, and I was using a white cane. And when I get in a line, I put my white cane, the tip of it, up against the back of the foot of the person in front of me so I can feel when they move ahead. And so I did that, what I thought was a person, and stood there and was standing there. And it's like, this line is not moving anywhere. And it's finally someone came up and said, have your cane up against one of the display aisles. You're not at the cash register at all.
Oh, wow.
I thought I was. And so it's just one of those things, just you got to brush it off and like, oh, I'm sorry. Thought it was a person there.
Now to kind of, let's touch on that quickly too, that other people will know that if they were to experience, you out walking around with a cane or anybody else with that, what exactly is going through your mind? I know you're trying to feel your way around a store, so people shouldn't be worried about that. But when you touch things, have you touched stuff so much like a floor or an aisle or something that you know what you're touching, right?
Yeah, a lot of times I can tell about what the texture of the floor is by the way the cane responds to it.
Wow.
The way the texture and the vibrations go through the cane, I can feel that, whether we're going on to concrete or tile or carpet.
Wow. So there's nothing really, a lot of people out there get kind of concerned when they see somebody out walking and feeling their way. Is it better for someone to kind of get out of your way and not, be in your presence? Or would you rather them, speak and say, hey, Luke, I'm here. I just wanted you to know you're coming down the aisle. Do you like interaction with other people?
Yeah, I do. I enjoy when someone says something. Even like at church, I'll be walking, trying to get through a hallway or something. And someone says, oh, excuse me, or hey, I'm right here. I'm like, okay, thanks. I know where you're at now. I know there's someone actually in front of me and I can navigate around them.
Right. And I think that really helps too, because I've been around a few guys like yourself and ladies, and it seems to be that's what, you want, the interaction. And a lot of times, like I said, people want to step back and kind of maybe stay out of the way, but it's actually a better thing for them to talk to you.
Or if you're going to step out of the way, just say, hey, I'm moving to, and tell you what direction. Because sometimes I may hear someone start moving and not sure which way they're going, and actually run to them when they're trying to get out of my way. And so if they just say, hey, I'm here, I'm going to move to your right, I can know to avoid them going the opposite direction.
I got you. All right. So now we're at the junction point of our podcast to where we love to ask our signature series question to be able to find out if we were at the end of the road for Luke and everybody were out there going to read the life of Luke and things that went on and how you overcome things, and such an amazing story you have now. But tell us what you hope people would read in that book of coming out of your life.
What I would hope people would learn or to see as they would read that book would be to see the power of God working through someone who yields himself to the Lord. That's what I would hope people would walk away with.
I mean, that's pretty powerful to be able to, put everything in there. And I want to touch on that too before we wind everything up here, that it is so awesome and refreshing to be around and listen to somebody that's got such faith in the Lord like you do. Of all the things that you've been through, you could very easily get mad at the Lord and say, I'm just done. I don't, why would God let this happen to me and these bad things? But you're doing the opposite. You're doing it for, his glory, and you're showing other people that you can overcome things. And maybe just give us a minute or two about your faith, and tell people, a way out there if they're struggling and trying to go through stuff. Give them some advice.
Yeah, I did struggle with that for a while, of the question of why. I did struggle. It's like, well, am I being punished for something? Why did God allow this? And it went on like that for a few months. And finally, I was sitting on the front porch one day and just kept thinking about it. And I remember crying out to God, even out loud. It's like, what did I do to deserve this? And I just felt him impress upon me. He says, this is not about you. And I was like, what does that mean? And trying to understand that. And he just kept saying, this is not about you. And he began to use some verses in my life, like Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7, about not being anxious for anything, but making our requests known to God with thanksgiving. And I began to write things on a piece of paper, even though I couldn't see them. But it's the act of writing helped me collect my thoughts and to be write things I was thankful for about God, because I didn't know what else to be thankful for about my situation. Just he directed me to give thanks about him. And I began to do that, to read my Bible more. And as I did, I felt him give me that peace. And I still did at the time, and even now, I still don't understand everything about why he allowed me to lose my sight, but I'm at peace with it now. And knowing I may not know under everything, but I know that he has a plan for it. I have to trust him and be obedient to what he shows me.
Right. That's amazing. Everybody out there listening, that's pretty inspiring to know that you've got that kind of faith in God and can use that every day to push yourself forward. Before we get out of here and let you go, tell everybody again, how do they get in touch with the book and get in touch with you to be able to reach out to you?
Sure. So the website is hisministries.com, and on there I'll have the links to the books that I've published and have links to my social media and my email there as well. People can reach out through any of those means to get in touch with me that way.
Okay, so if they want to get you to come speak at their church, then that's the best way to get you is hisministries.com, right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Well, Luke, we thank you very much for your time today and coming on and telling us your inspiring story. And I can't wait to touch base with you again in a few years and be able to see how much further you've come along with the college that you've got. And when you got your degree and you're out there preaching, I want to show up to one of these churches, or even the church that you take over and start preaching. I want to be there and see this, because I'm very inspired by hearing the story and then hearing other people in the community talk about you. So I'm just very grateful and thankful to you for coming on our show today.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to come on.
Well, all right. Well, everybody out there listening, thank you for tuning in, and go check us out, the Apple Podcast, Podbean, YouTube, and let us know. Leave us a like and subscribe on YouTube, and give us some comments. If you got anybody else out there that's got a great inspiring story that you'd like us, the world, to hear, then give us a contact and we'll be in touch.